Good afternoon, Luang Por.
Good afternoon, Ajahn.
Thank you for another opportunity to ask you some questions. So today is Monday, 14th of July, 2025. And today I was wondering what you could offer as reflections around this notion that a lot of people meet coming up in practice generally, waiting for the conditions to be right in order to practice, finding the right monastery, finding the right teacher, finding the right community, being in the right mood, when the weather is not so hot or not so cold, at another moment of the day, when I feel better physically. Like there's a tendency in the mind to almost always look for conditions, waiting for conditions to improve, to get to it. And it obviously sounds a bit ridiculous, but there is a tendency to do this in the mind. What's driving that state of mind in your experience, and what is helpful that you may have found through your practice and teaching over the years?
Well, the samsara of the world is the very nature of realm of suffering. And this the Buddha stated very clearly in his first sermon. But it's not like everything's miserable and terrible, but it's like things change, things that we like and love and want are that, so we can always imagine something better than what we have. The imagination does that, no matter how good life can be, you still can imagine it better. Or you're afraid that it's going to change in a way that it isn't so pleasant. And the human mind is like that for all of us. It's not just certain types of people, men and women, the same thing. And if we're looking for the perfect monastery, the perfect teacher, the perfect teaching, perfection in things that are changing, then we imagine we'll find something that doesn't change that's perfect. But perfect teachers change, perfect monasteries change, perfect weather changes. This is what the Buddha was pointing to be the witness to change rather than someone who's trying to stop change. Because as a personality, your personality changes. When you begin to be aware of your ego, your personality, you see it's very changing all the time. So it's just people praise you and you feel happy. People criticize you, you feel angry or hurt. And your personality goes up and down with the worldly dhammas. When you're successful, you feel happy, but that happiness is not permanent. Being successful in the world is fine, but it's not a kind of permanent condition you can depend on. Because with success you get failure, with beauty you get ugliness, with whatever you imagine as the best monastery can change into the worst monastery. And it's not a matter of finding perfection in that which is imperfect, because inevitably you're going to be disappointed with yourself, with your relatives, with your children, with life in general. So this is to be witnessed to. It's not like resigning yourself in a negative way to the misery of samsara. It's not a negative state, but it's a attentive one to the way it is, the way you as an individual operate. You know, some people are very positive about themselves, others are very depressed and negative. And, you know, then does the happy, positive person, you know, is that what you want to become, a happy, positive person on a permanent level? Or if you're a happy, positive person, you look down on those who are cynical and depressed. You know, you can, and that's a miserable state, to look down on somebody or to be discontented with the way you are. And so mindfulness is a path to the deathless. It's awareness. It's here and now. It's not dependent on how wonderful the teacher or the teaching or the monastery or the weather. It's always here and now, consciousness here and now, that is our refuge. Because, you know, in my own experience, when I first lived with Luang Por Sumedho, my mind would complain too much work. They're building the dining hall, and then they're building a wall, and build a road to a branch monastery, and my mind would complain about it, because I came here for peace and quiet, not for labors like this. I remember spending 6 months at a branch monastery helping to build a road up a hill to the top of a high hill. And my duty, because we can't dig in the soil, bhikkhus are not allowed to dig into the soil. My duty was to break rocks. So I stood in the hot sun with a sledgehammer, breaking up rocks into pebbles, and we would pave the road.
That's prisoner's work, Luang Por.
That's what you see in horrible movies. I didn't have manacles on my ankles. And then it was a hot season, so it was very hot there. And then we were in an area, a hilly area of northeast Thailand, where there was just pure rocks. There were no trees. And we had the morning puja at 3 in the morning, and we had the midnight, go on alms round, plus work all afternoon, late into the evening. And my mind would complain about it. But I didn't have insight into being the witness to the mind. So I learned a lot. I freed myself from a lot of that negativity just by watching. I wasn't trying to justify what was being done or convince myself I'm happy about it or that I like it in any way. I wasn't trying to create positive perceptions about something that emotionally I felt very negative about. But by abiding in the awareness of my feelings, I can think, you know, who's grumbling, who's complaining? And then in Thailand, being a Buddhist country, Thai people are very generous, so people would come to the monastery and help out and offer nice food and cold drinks and things like that. It made me feel so grateful for an iced Pepsi Cola. You go, what's that? How that arises when it's hot and you're sweating and you're thirsty, and then somebody gives you a iced soda pop, and you see the happiness of just that, and a kind of gratitude to the thoughtfulness of the village people that were helping out. So I began to tune in to, to the joy of the life, and that I was experiencing by being grateful for the food. The villagers would prepare the best food they could create, and Chinese merchants from nearby town would bring really excellent Chinese food and things like that to offer to the monks for their meal. We had only one meal a day. But I found in Thailand, the kind of group way Thais work together is quite joyful. They're very good at working in groups. And you must have noticed this.
I have indeed.
Because they're not so convinced they're individuals. They're very supportive of each other in so many ways. And they're basically very generous. Their culture, Thai culture, is based on generosity. So it's ingrained in the cultural conditioning. So eventually I asked Luang Por if I could go off to meditate in an isolated place, and he gave permission. So I went up to this mountain peak in the northeastern Thailand, and it was very beautiful, but the alms round took hours. They had walked down this mountain to a meeting place where villagers would come to offer food, then you'd have to climb back up. One time we were eating at the top of this mountain, our meal, one meal a day, and we noticed a helicopter flying overhead looking at us. And within a few hours, the police came and arrested me. They thought I was a communist. And that wasn't part of my plan when I asked Ajahn Sumedho to go off to this remote place where I could really get my meditation together. And finally, they took me to the local police station, which was quite a few miles away, and they decided I wasn't a communist, so they took me back. I had to climb back up this mountain. And then a rainstorm came, terrible thunder, wind and rain blew the kitchen hot off the edge of the cliff, and all kinds of things. I became very averse to. I was sharing this remote place with 2 Thai monks, and I developed a lot of criticism of one of the monks. I'd become obsessed with how wrong and how unpleasant this monk is. And I became obsessed with disliking him and wishing he'd go away. And, all I was doing was idolizing the situation as a kind of remote hermitage where I could get my practice together. But then I caught malaria, and everything went wrong that year. All my ideas of the perfect situation on a level of nature, it was beautiful. But my mind, would pick out little things I didn't like about this or that monk, and the food wasn't very good, and it wasn't enough, and being arrested by the police over nothing, and the complaining mind was in full action. And finally I promised Ajahn Chah I'd go back or spend the Vasa season, the 3 month rainy season at Wapapo. So I did that very gladly. I was so glad to get back. And the monastery was full up with bhikkhus, and they didn't have a kuti, like a meditation hut for me. So I had to share this other hall with about 6 other bhikkhus. And I'm a very private person. I want to be alone. I like privacy and silence. But I didn't care. I learned my lesson just by realizing how I was trying to find conditions around to support me in my desires. And nature just wouldn't cooperate the way I wanted it to.
How did you not sink into kind of depression and negativity and cynicism about it all? Is it just kind of character or some attitude you developed, pulled yourself up by your bootstraps, or like, did it just happen?
Well, when people describe chronic depression, I don't think I ever experienced that. I get depressed, but it didn't last. I wasn't kind of stuck in a depressive mental state ever. And even at Pupek Mountain, everything went wrong, and I didn't. I could observe that, and I had insight already into watching the mind. But I had this idea that I could do it better being alone in a remote forest, in a quiet place with no demands made on me whatsoever, no irritating other people around me. And through that experience, I realized what I was doing. I was looking for a perfect situation that I could idealize. But that's not the nature of the world that I've experienced, either physically, essentially, through nature or through the human body. It's just not, that's not the way life is.
You never found such a place?
Never. Amaravati is about as close as I've ever been.
So that's
But now, through these experiences, like Luang Por Sumedho's initial instruction before I learned to understand Thai language was to be the watcher, the Bhutto, the Buddha watching the Dhamma the way things are. And I really liked that teaching. I thought that's realistic, and I could do that quite naturally, because the first year where I was learning to understand Thai language, which is it's a tonal language, so it's not like learning French or Italian. And so it's and you have to learn to speak with the right tones to monosyllables and all that, which I couldn't tell the difference at first. I had to listen and pay attention. And to this day, I'm not all that confident about getting the right tone when I speak Thai. But I did get the impression of watching, being a watcher, just listening to my mind complaining. And when I was invited to come to the UK in 1977, I made a vow before I came here that I would not complain about anything. I wouldn't grumble. I wouldn't compare England with Thailand or America. I just accept the flow of life as I experienced it. So that determination, before I even came here to England, was foremost in my intention. So my memories of the past, and spent 34, 35 years in the UK now, and many pleasant and unpleasant things have happened to me. But the practice has always been the watcher, the observer. So you become expert at it. Because that's stable, that's perfect. Mindfulness here and now is stable and perfect. And then you realize that's your true nature. What you think is your true nature, you think I'm depressive or I'm positive or I'm a good person or a bad person. That's very unstable, and that's just a belief system. It's not reality in any way. Where when you really abide, it's your natural home. Where you really belong is in awareness here and now. So that's the way out of suffering. That's the nirodha, or the end of suffering, when you realize your true nature is not a complicated neurotic personality, or to blame the world for suffering, or God, or anything else. You realize the suffering is the very nature of the changing sensual world that we experience.
Before you had that insight that this is our real home, and you just kind of developed that insight in earlier stages of the practice, where you can sometimes forget that and get caught up in the world, in the grumbling and the complaining, in the details of the samsaric experience. Did you use any tricks or mantras or phrases you used to kind of guide yourself back to that point?
Well, in the early years of my monastic life, I'm an obsessed thinker. I was educated and I liked thinking. I read a lot of books. And when I met Luang Por, he told me to put away all my books and just watch the changingness of my mind. So I did that. That was the first year. He said, put all your books under the bed and leave them there for this 3 months range retreat. So I did. I had a lot of books, Buddhist books, Dhamma books, and I just, and then he used the mantra, Buddho, Buddha's name, and I found that very helpful. I never really used mantras. I formed opinion about it. It's just thinking. But then I began to realize that thinking is such a strong habit, that thinking about not thinking is still thinking. And no matter whatever you think, you're thinking. And how to stop it. So I found the mantra Buddho very good, because it's the Buddha's name, and I found it. I could use it. I started, if I was too slow with it, then I started thinking again. So at first I just started using Bhutto with the inhalation, for the inhalation, To for the exhalation. But that was too slow. My mind would just still go rampant. So I stopped trying to align it with the breathing of the body to just thinking Bhutto as fast as I could, where I didn't have a chance to start thinking anything else. I thought I had this determination, I'm just going to think Bhutto. That's all. I'm not going to let get anything out of it. So to do that, I had to do it speedily.
Out loud or in your mind?
Yes.
Out loud.
I didn't have to repeat it.
Mm.
I'd go Bhutto, 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 Bhutto. And in no way another thought could get in between the Bhuttos that were going through my mind.
How long can you sustain that?
Well, I found out after a while, I found I could align it with breathing, with Anapanasati. Because just repeating Bhutto, Bhutto at first, and just trying to stop any other thought from entering. You can do that. And you find it changes from how you feel silent. Silent spaces between Bhuttos. And so I can actually reach a level of tranquility through chanting Bhutto. I thought that worked very well for me. And then because the general meditation technique thought was Bhutto aligned with inhalation, exhalation, I could do that. Where in the beginning, just trying to do that, I couldn't do it. My mind was so used to thinking, and it didn't have any reference to anything else except I wanted to stop thinking. I wanted tranquility, and then the despair that comes when you can't get what you want. This is where you have to let Panya guide you and think, well, if I'm going to think, why not just think the one word? So rather than trying to stop thinking, just think one word that gives it a nice meaning, like the awakened mind. Buddha means awakened. So I tried to do it with Coca-Cola, but Coca-Cola doesn't have the same reverent quality to it. So I realized whether it was Bhutto or Coca-Cola, it was Bhutto really gave me confidence, not Coca-Cola. So it's just experimenting with my mind. And then reflecting on the first and second noble truths, suffering and the cause of suffering, I found, that the attachment to desire is the cause of suffering, and the insight is to let go of desire. So I found the English word let go very useful. I'd get attached, I'd start grumbling or complaining or worrying or getting caught in intellectual exercises. And then I'd say, let go. And I could do it, inhalation, let, and exhalation go. Because that's an insight, to let go of samsara, of condition, of phenomena. And all the time there was this reflection on all conditions are impermanent. And I would also challenge myself: do I believe that, or is that really true? And I thought, I should believe it because the Buddha said that. But then I realized, then I'm just accepting words, believing what you read in the scriptures. But maybe there is something permanent. So it was a challenge, that like a koan, is there something permanent? And where I could actually see all thoughts, all emotions change according to other conditions. I could witness that. I could actually observe that arising and ceasing.
So it was really a way of proving it to yourself rather than taking someone's word for it.
Exactly. Because I'd done that with Christianity. I just believed what I was told and felt guilty if I'd doubted, or, you're told that you must love God, the first commandment. And so that was given to me when I was a very innocent child. So that formed the way I saw that you had to love God. And then I began to question that. I don't even know what God is. Then the Christianity I grew up with was Anglicanism, and you believe in the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so I think there's three gods in one, and my mother tried to say, you just have to believe that. You can't figure it out. And so, up to a certain age, I could just believe what my mother, who I trusted and loved, what she told me, I just grasp it, believe it. But then as I grew older, I started questioning. I said I believe in God, and I don't know what that is. And so I determined to find out for myself.
In Buddhism, there are a lot of the teachings that really make sense in Buddhism. So it's easy to actually believe it because it makes sense. Like impermanence. Liberation is beyond happiness and suffering. But then you were talking about actually looking to know for yourself in terms of practice.
Well, that's what if I believe in God as a Father, as a Son, and they say the Holy Ghost, these are all words. I could, my father was a kind of patriarchal authority figure, and so I assumed God was like that, a judge, and I would judge you on whether you're good or bad, right or wrong. So, you grow up with a lot of fear and doubt and worry because you're not always perfect. You tell lies, or I stole things and as a little boy, and when I was in puberty, I didn't know how to handle my sexual energies, and I told it was a sin, and so you feel guilty about having sexual arousals, which you can't help when you're a teenager. So you think, if you judge yourself according to the conditions, then you're a sinner because you don't understand what's happening to your body, and you've been told that like masturbation is sinful, and you should only have sex when you're married by a Christian priest. So you get all these commandments given to you, and I began, when I started university, I began to question it. And I was actually afraid that I'd lose my faith. So after a year or so of studying Chinese language and Chinese history, I decided I'd become a priest. Just to kind of, I better commit myself seriously to a vocation where I won't be in danger. And then everything collapsed around me. I think everything was, I wasn't interested in that. The bishop had me teaching Sunday school, which I hated. I didn't have the belief or the confidence to convince children about Jesus anymore. I just wanted out, just let me out of here. So I enlisted in the Navy in 1953. And that got me out of the confusion around becoming a priest. And it was in the Navy that I came across Buddhism. And that just registered as something practical, because the world, like high church Anglicanism and Catholicism is pretty gruesome. It's all about crucifixes and blood and Virgin Mary's crying with thorns around their heart, and it's pretty, really kind of bloody and horrid in its way, where Buddhism gave you these kind of figures like Buddha Rupas, which are like human form sitting in posture, completely at peace. And so everything that I came across in Japan during 1955 impressed me as wide open. And so ever since that 1955, I really considered myself a Buddhist.
So coming back to what you were describing earlier in terms of practice, you resolved to not just believe that everything was impermanent, but prove it to yourself.
Yeah, I thought I have to prove it because the Buddha said that. You have to know this for yourself. And all conditions are impermanent. I could prove that. Just by observing my mind or my body, what I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel. There's nothing, when you really witness yourself and your experiences through the senses, how changeable they are. Where if you're not kind of encouraged to do that, then you never really notice how changeable everything is. And you form, brought up to be idealistic about how heaven is a place where you go if you've been good and it's forever and it's changeless. So but then when you when you have a human body, it changes. You can't stop it from growing old. And then you get sick, you get malaria. So one time I had malaria. This was in my early years with Ajahn Chah. And Luang Por Sumedho came to see me, and I said, Ajahn, I can't get samadhi now because I've got all of this malaria. I said, I was really getting somewhere in my samadhi practice. And I can't do that. It's just the fevers are too strong and the discomfort. And Luang Por Sumedho said, so malaria is your practice. Now this is pointing to the way it is. If you've got malaria, it's like this. It's not you personally can get samadhi anymore. Because when I felt I was getting somewhere, getting my jhanas together and everything, then I didn't have malaria. And and I was in a very nice place where I could be alone. A lot of time to be quiet and develop concentration, develop samadhi. And the word samadhi is very, it's presented to you as something really desirable, that you have to get it. It's kind of imperatives that you must get samadhi. And so, then you believe that me as a personality must get samadhi before I can actually be enlightened. So then you read texts about getting samadhi and you follow the instructions. And then malaria ruined my samadhi. And I didn't ask for malaria. It was not like a desirable disease. And so, in fact, I was feeling sorry for myself and frightened that I was going to die. And
so how did you use malaria as your practice?
Well, Luang Por Sumedho, what he said always seemed very important.
Mm.
So he said, samadhi is malaria is your practice. So I started observing it rather than just wishing it would go away or worrying about it or complaining about not being able to meditate. I just stopped all doing that kind of mental state that I created about myself personally and just observed the actual experience of malarial fevers. And I could observe, that it wasn't as bad as my mind was complaining about it. That you get these fevers, and then they break, and then you feel very cool and very pleasant when the malarial fevers break. And you soak everything in your meditation, because just all the water in the body floods out of you, and it's very cooling. And just noticing that it is not just all just miserable and unpleasant, but it has its moments of pleasant sensations. And what was unpleasant was worrying and not wanting it, and wanting to get my old samadhi practice together again. So it was an insight. Malaria gave me a strong insight into observing life as you're experiencing it. It's not what I would want again. I'm not addicted to malaria, but I did learn from it. I had the insight that malaria is like this, discomfort, and of course naturally not wanted. It's not a desirable thing. And then it breaks, a feverish break, and you feel this relief and sense of coolness and pleasantness, which before I didn't really pay much attention to it. I just thought it's all going to start again because these fevers would repeat themselves.
So in a way, coming back to the question at the beginning of our session today, it's kind of wanting the conditions to be perfect in order to start practicing. The malaria is a good conclusion point in the illustrating that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wanting things to be perfect is because you're never going to find it that way. The samsara is not perfect. And don't believe me, just find out for yourself is that by observing it. Like this summer here in England, the weather being so perfectly pleasant, and yet we complain about not enough rain. And the grass is turning brown and things like that. So and in some places, like in Africa, or Middle East, where it's hot all the time, where the sun, clear blue skies, day after day is boring. And you want to find an oasis or air conditioning to get out of the sunlight. I mean, when is weather going to be constantly perfect? Or we were talking about the tsunami that happened, when was that, in 2004?
I believe so, yeah.
And that where so many people drowned, innocent, good people. And, then you think, what did they do to deserve this? To be just overwhelmed by huge, gigantic waves that destroy everything in sight. And if you believe in a God, you think, how could God allow this to happen? Innocent people, maybe, in sunny Thailand, and which is, like Phuket and Krabi are paradises of tropical beauty, and yet they were absolute hell due to that. Why did God allow that to happen to a really nice country like Thailand? Is because they're not Christian? Or you can imagine anything. But then the Second World War, I grew up during the Second World War, and you heard about the Holocaust in Europe, where the murdering of all the 6 million Jews. And I remember thinking, how could God allow that to happen? There is people, he was a Jew himself, and Jesus was a Jew. Why didn't he stop it? Stop the Nazis from, as a boy, and you believe God is all powerful, and then Jews are chosen people, nothing makes sense. So it's about, you're told this, and then you have to find excuses. It's not God's fault, it's because of some other cause. And you can intellectually justify anything you want, really. But that's the thinking mind, the intellect, which is artificial. It's impermanent, it's untrustworthy. So the perfect monastery, perfect teacher is an ideal, not reality.
Thank you very much for these reflections, Paul.